Next up is going to be Geoff Huston. Geoff is the chief scientist at APNIC. He will be talking about some really interesting work he's been doing in tracking the usage of unique URLs. Geoff.
Thanks, Manish, and good afternoon, everyone. You took my clicker, didn't you? Oh, is this it? Yeah. Okay. This was actually meant to be a presentation at the last NANOG, but some snow in Georgia or something got in the way. So it's here today. For any of you who are followers of Banksy, this is a piece of street art outside the British GCHQ, their computer communications spook headquarters. Isn't it brilliant? But this is kind of from the sublime to the ridiculous in terms of topic, because it's one of those sort of strange things you see in the data and you kind of go, that's not meant to happen. We've been doing a lot of work over the last couple of years in trying to understand the internet from the perspective of all of us. In other words, looking at the network from the point of view of the user. And one way to do this, oddly enough, is to use one of the most remarkable pieces of technology we've ever invented, which is the online ad. Because if you think about it, ads are programmable. They embed flash code, and you can do things inside ads, you know, what makes the ad animate. But you can do lots of other things as well, and ads give you the ability to put code in millions of people's machines, just quietly doing very small tests. And most of the time it's just get this URL. And if the URL happens to only work in v6, you can start to look at what's the user's view of v6? Or if, for example, the DNS name of that URL happens to be signed with DNSSEC, you can look at the amount of use of users of DNSSEC validation. You know, you can do all of those kinds of things with a very simple ad and just embedding some code. So we do around, 500,000 of these tests every single day. And the beauty of the ad network is Google try bloody hard to make sure every day I get fresh eyeballs. So it's not that, the same 500,000 folk get victimised by this really crap ad. The pain is shared across literally millions, if not hundreds of millions of users. This is fantastic. And what's even better is that if you don't click on it, I don't pay. So the trick is to make an ad that is so bland and shit that no one clicks on it. So, don't click here does not work, by the way. It does not work. And click me doesn't work for much the same reason. You have to make it so bland it's not funny. But we kind of got there. We get about 500,000 ads a day for $100, which is a bargain. So one of the things that really stuffs things up in this kind of ad work is caching. Right? Caching is evil. Because what I want is for you to talk to my servers. I don't want no crap caching in the way. So I try really, really hard to make sure that everything I do, every single time an ad gets delivered, the URL, the DNS name, is unique. Never appeared before, never going to appear again, right? So when I deliver this ad to you, you're going to come back to me and do some things with me, and nobody else in the room is going to do that, right? Right? So at times, I get to see this. 22nd of January, someone in Henan Mobile Communications in Japan went and got something. This is cool, this is normal, there's a bunch of digits there. But a little bit further on in the logs, exactly 68 seconds later, it's precisely the same get string from somebody else. That's not right. That's not right. So you kind of go, wow, that's fascinating. I wonder how often this happens. So I started looking and sort of thought, well, okay, let's start at the start of this year, 2014, and sort of see how many times this happened. So up until last Friday, 61 million, God, Google is good, 61 million unique end user IP addresses, had these ads delivered to them, and 110,000 appeared to have a stalker. Now you kind of go, it's 1 in 500. It's actually a bit higher than that, because there's a fair deal of incidence of gnats. In fact, seems to me from much the same mechanism, around 3 to 4% of the world's users are now sitting behind carrier-grade gnats that use IP address pools with really aggressive timeouts, less than 10 seconds. So there's a lot of natting around, which makes that 1 in 500 figure a bit low, I think. It's probably a bit higher than that. How much higher? A bit hard. But 110,000 folk are being stalked. So what does this say about privacy? What does this say about, well, it's me, it's my browser, I'm going to things. So who's looking over your shoulder? Because with 1 in 500, that's weird. That's really weird. So let's do the stalking rates by country. And you can. So if you're in Laos, 3% of the URLs in Laos have attracted a stalker. 2.5% in Macau, China 1.4%, you can read as well as I can. USA, 0.5%. Second time. Singapore, slightly lower. That's a strange set of countries. Now, this is supposedly a conversation between your browser and my server. Unique URL, no one else is meant to be involved. And you kind of go, well, I can understand some of these places, that they do strange things with their users, but other countries, you know, your eyebrows are rising. That's not meant to happen like that. So that's the top 30 countries at the rates at which someone's looking over your shoulder. Now, some of the samples are low. Google only gave me 306 ads presented in Greenland. Naughty Google. I want more Greenland, thank you. But you know, the other countries, the sample rates are really quite good, so it's reasonable data. So, you know, 213 million unique URLs, and some 378,000 were stalked. So let's have a look at the stalkers, those 1,579 source networks that are peering over collectively our shoulders, looking at everything we're doing. How long does it take for the stalker to activate? That's kind of interesting. That's a stalking delay. It's a log scale, so it gets a bit interesting. A huge number of the stalks happen in the first 3 seconds. You go somewhere, it goes somewhere. You go somewhere, it goes somewhere. There's a small peak at 10 seconds. Interesting. My script that you're executing has a wait 10 seconds. So there's something about your machine and its code that causes that little blip around 10 seconds. And there's a huge blip at half a day, 12 hours out the other end. Some kind of proxy with some kind of timer. So, you know, the 10 seconds, let's try the same experiment without the 10-second timer. And this is a different piece of the same experiment, but there's no internal 10-second timer. Now there's a massive peak at half an hour and 1 hour. So I'm kind of thinking that there's two kind of stalkers out there. You've invited some of them into your house, into your browser. Your browser is sitting there waiting for the scripts in a page to execute, and then as soon as everything's finished, it activates and reports home. And that's that 10-second gap stalking that I'm seeing, that you've loaded up this crap. It's your fault you're being stalked. It's on your machine. Whether you invited them in or it's a virus, I don't know, your problem. But, you know, there is a percentage of stalking that's precisely that. The second result says that there's an awful lot of intercepting middleware. And some of it's kind of, I must refresh what the user retrieved. I must get it again in 30 seconds and 60 seconds, that auto refresh cycle. So inside this, there's a bit of me and a bit of you. So who are they? All of you in the first 3 rows, that's who they are. Fair deal of Google with a fair deal of time delay in stalking. It might be something to do with their web crawling. But you know, Telefonica in Peru, Department of Workplace Relations in Australia, intercepting middleware. And up the top, something in China net. So those are sort of the stalkers, and you kind of think, well, I don't quite know. I've just cleared the last octet, by the way, so you know, you can have a look at all those addresses and figure out which one of the 256 is it. It's my hideously clever attempt to hide their identity. Yeah, right. Could this be web proxies? Could you be going through something that's actually doing the URL harvesting as it goes through the firewall, whatever? So a strong indicator of that is it's in the same AS as me. So I can look through that same set of data and filter it out going, when the stalker and the victim are in the same AS, let's just throw them out and see what's left. Well, the Department of Workplace Relations is thrown out, maybe they're relieved about this, and up comes AbovNet. Interesting. And a whole lot of Chinese networks are now doing that in that top list. So these are the folk who have a different AS from the victim. So whatever's going on, the stalker is in another network. Might be on the path still, it might be on the wire, I don't know. Haven't looked, there's still a bit of Google there. But that's this sort of refined list. And you kind of go, well, you know, I've heard about the Great Firewall of China, you have too. Maybe this is all about nation states getting worried about their citizens. It happens. So why don't I do one more filter? So I'll use the RIR stats because, you know, it's quick and it's easy and it's mildly accurate, not fantastically, but good enough, and get rid of all the folk where the victim and the stalker are in the same country. Aha! So who's stalking across borders? This group of people. ChinaNet, backbone, is still up there as number one. Covenant Eyes in the US is number two, and dear old AbovNet numbers 3 and 4, and so on and so forth. But although you notice that third column, the number of instances, I've got 100,000 coming in from ChinaNet, and the next set of numbers are really, really low. So, you know, the others are doing something, but that ChinaNet backbone, that is so weird. So I thought I'd look it up on Whois, and you can do the same. And you do, you know, whois apnic.net, that address, and it says China Telecom. China Telecom have around 300 million customers because they're bloody huge. So I go, aha, I will do whois cnnic.cn. And you can do it too, and the result is one line, out of this registry. So that's mildly uninformative. So whatever's going on in Guangzhou province in China, which is as good as I can get with that address, that's pretty weird. Because all of the victims of that stalker live in other countries. So you kind of think, what is this? I'm like, is this the Red Army gone feral? Is this Huawei gear with the backdoor chip working overtime? Is this just, you know, the Chinese branch of someone like Google doing nefarious things, you know, it's commercial espionage? You know, is this just straight up commercial data collection or just a bloody good virus? All of those theories are probably viable, but let's see where we go with this, because I'm really interested in looking at who are the stalker looking at, who are the victims. So this is the countries of the victims. And the amazing thing is, that's almost every country on the planet. In other words, this stalker is sort of picking out victims from everywhere, including Senegal, and, you know, a whole bunch of countries where you just wouldn't even think the internet has even reached until last week. You know, this is really bizarre. Why are they going for a complete list of countries? Yes, Google ads are everywhere and YouTube's pretty cool too, but, you know, are you more likely to be stalked if you're living in country A or country B? By absolute numbers, if you live in those countries, you're more likely to be stalked by this particular stalker than any other. You know, China, Singapore, the UK, Japan. Strange list. That's the top 25, absolutely. And then I thought, well, maybe the ads are biasing a bit. Let's do this relatively. Let's do this on a percentage terms. So in Macau, 3% of the time you're likely to be stalked by this particular stalker. China, the Northern Mariana Islands. What? What is going on there? This is an amazingly selective virus and an amazingly weird one. This is just weird crap. So you kind of go, what's the timing of this particular stalker? How long does it take from the URL fetch to the stalk? The average was 74 seconds, but in reality, almost everything happens not in 1 second, not in 2 seconds, but 3 seconds. I don't know why 3. Tick, 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 3, bang. Really weird. And some of the stalks happen a day later, you know, it just takes forever. But there's this strong peak at 3 seconds. So that didn't really help. What about those user agent strings? Because I'm collecting absolutely everything. I'm doing full packet capture of the lot. So what's the stalker? The stalker is weirdly dull and stupid because they use the same address every time in the same user agent string. It's Maxthon. So if this was an incredibly clever state-based espionage effort, they're bloody stupid. Which, you know, is probably a good sign for government work. You know, I'm not going to discount that, but it does seem a bit weird that if you're doing this fantastic job at culling user URLs and stalking them, you think you could cover your tracks a bit better than that. So, you know, okay, what about the victims? Well, you've got to be running Windows. And the signatures look a lot like Chrome. This is weird. So am I seeing some kind of virus on Windows and Chrome? You'd like to think so, or maybe you wouldn't. That's the wrong city to say that. Of course you wouldn't like to see this. Absolutely not. No. There's something else in that user agent string that does start to give it away a bit more. Back at the end there is a very, very strange signature that's on most of the victims. So this is a user string that says, I'm a bit of Chrome and I'm a bit of Safari, weird, and I've got this other bit that is only used by a pinyin Chinese language input form of browser called Sogou Explorer 2.x. And Wikipedia has this to say about it. You can look it up too. But there's a little strange little quote at the back end there. It uses cloud services to filter out websites and software. So it does appear in this case that this is cloud mania. Most of the stalking that I'm seeing isn't some fantastic piece of Red Army brilliance. It is actually just another instance of pretty crap cloud mania, and that what the users are doing is loading on a Chinese language browser and then heading off and leaking all their secrets. So what someone in Greenland is doing that beats me with a stick. There are some bigger lessons about all this though, which I think are kind of interesting and kind of disturbing. 1 in 500 users having a stalker is a really lousy observation about our own expectations. Irrespective of whether you encrypt on the fly or not, I think all of us expect that the URLs we go to are the URLs we choose to go to, and it's not posted up in public for everyone else to look at, observe and laugh at. It is meant to be a relationship that does have some elements of privacy, and it just isn't happening. That's a big enough number to get worried. Now, a lot of this is kind of self-inflicted. It's just content caching or some other kind of stuff that's sort of on the wire. But you then got to worry that there are these lists of URLs. Who gets to see them? Are they sold? Does this become commercial data about users that is traded using your identity without any of your knowledge? What conditions is that kind of information bartered about? Are we comfortable with that? Or are any of us even aware that the rate is that high at all? Today's internet is not yesterday's. This is really just a tiny glimpse. That's only 69 million, and there are 2.3 billion of us. This constant flow of information. And you kind of wonder who's wandering around the exhaust pipe having a sniff at those digital fumes. Because my suspicion is there are a lot more folk crowded around your exhaust pipe than you ever dared to imagine. What's happening in the larger world of this? I have no idea. But if a tiny experiment of ads can uncover something, the larger world, I think, is much, much weirder than that. So that's where I got to. Thank you very much to Warren Kamari, who helped me finding the pointing agent at the Sogou browser, because at one stage we were both convinced this was a Chrome bug or a virus, and that would be a really bad thing. So yes, thank you, Warren, for redirecting me down a better path. And that's about all I have. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Geoff?
Hello? Yep. Tony Tauber, Comcast. So what about those services or whatever plugins that say, allow us to make sure you don't, visit malicious sites accidentally or whatnot? I mean, is that what this thing is? But it's a Chinese language version of it?
I suspect that that's what's going on. There was a case in Australia 2.5 years ago where they were doing, safe web browsing, and the issue is somebody commercially had to get a list of all the naughty sites. How do you do that? Well, you sniff the exhaust fumes of users and then go and visit it yourself, going looking for flesh tones. The only problem was in Australia that extracting URLs out of a data stream happened to contravene the law. But stuff it, they're a telephone company, it was all okay, wasn't it? That's the way a lot of these content folk get their data. They actually just sniff what folk do. Sometimes it's with your knowledge, sometimes it just happens on the wire and you have no idea it's going on. NetSweeper, I think, is one of the companies doing it.
Hi,
Hi.
Paul Barford, University of Wisconsin. Was Google the only ad network that you used for this study?
I use Google Ads to enlist millions of folk. So generally, when Google kind of get desperate to get my $100 out of me, and they do get desperate for $100, they're just down there, they tend to splash this stuff on YouTube. So I tend to see the folk running YouTube that support Flash. Got Apple, got an iOS phone? No, won't see you. Most other things I will see, but it is biased towards the folk who watch YouTube. But that's the internet, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, thank you.